Hey everybody, this is Rob Jolliffe. It is time for another Sabre Limited Expert Series. So let's get into it. So today I'm going to do a second in my series on Business Central implementation tips. I'm planning on doing a whole bunch of these. Today's tip is don't try and recreate your existing ERP in Business Central. Once again, I'm Rob Jolliffe. I'm president of Sabre Limited. I'm an expert in supply chain and Microsoft Dynamics Business Central. And I do these videos basically to help companies understand ERP concepts and Business Central, and I'm targeting particularly to the small, medium enterprise manufacturing company. But if you're not a manufacturing company, this is very applicable, this particular example that I'm doing today. Also, typically I'm targeting mid-market ERP systems, so I'm not looking at the big SAP Oracle type implementations. They're quite different, and a lot of the stuff that we talked about in these sessions don't apply. If you happen to like this video and you'd like to, first of all, we'd love it if you click like on the video and leave a comment if you're interested in this topic and have any feedback for us. But also, if you'd like to have a quick call with me, my Calendly link is below in the video notes, and you can book a call with me, and I can go through with you and answer any questions you have about this video. So today I want to talk about an implementation tip. It's something that I see companies occasionally do incorrectly. They could do a better job in that they are trying to recreate their old ERP system with Business Central, and I want to go over why that's probably not a really good idea. The first is it means customizing, and probably a lot of customizing. It was really common in the 90s and the 2000s. So when we look back at older ERP systems in the past, they were really purpose built to be customized to what the customer needed, and they were designed so that the customer kind of took over the ERP and made it their own. But it was very hard for that ERP to be upgraded, and a lot of people had troubles upgrading ERPs because of that. What the idea was that you were going to buy the ERP and you're going to change it, the ERP that you purchased, you're going to change it to suit you. You wanted to make it suit your business, thinking that this would reduce change management. Your team would have to change less of the processes. It would be easier for them to learn the ERP. And instinctively, that seemed logical. It seems logical. It's instinctive that it would be easier to learn an ERP this way. And it instinctively, it sort of thought like, well, this would be less change for my team. My team will get along just fine with it. But it's a bad approach. And it has mostly been abandoned in the 2010s and on. I'll say one thing about this bad approach. I think those instincts that it would be reduced change management, it'd be easier for people, I think they're missing the point that the inherent change in the software, like having to learn new software techniques, is very disruptive to people. And thinking that having to learn those disruptive software techniques and combining it with your current processes would be easier, I don't really actually think that's true, because often by trying to change it and you're customizing it, until it's customized, it doesn't make sense to the users, and they're really having a lot of trouble learning it and understanding it. So I just in general think it's a bad idea. It is no longer popular. So some reason it doesn't work. I gave a couple of reasons, but like number one, not everyone is involved in this change, and so what it does is it creates optimization. And when I say not everyone does it, I mean not everyone within your organization is trying to change the current ERP system to match their old ERP system. And so what you end up is some departments are trying to change the ERP to match what they want, but they're doing it in isolation of other departments, and they're creating what I call suboptimization. So they're creating within their team something that works for them, but then it breaks downstream processes. And part of the reason that this happens is my number two reason is that your team are not software designers. So they're trying to give guidance as a bunch of individual departments to a ERP consulting team that doesn't really know why you're changing it. Like, they're trying to convince you to use the out of the box capabilities, but you're trying to get them to change. So they're not really clear on what the big picture is, but you're not either. And so that's going to create a Frankenstein's monster. You're going to end up with a lot of different features rolling into a lot of different departments that are not really compatible with each other, and you end up with a real problem. And this is what happened in the 90s and the 2000s, and it led to a lot of companies just re-implementing their ERP and taking all that customization out. It slows the project down a lot. Like, it will really drag a project out. So if somebody tells you you could get an ERP implemented in a year, but then you let the teams in individual departments begin trying to design and change the system to suit what they do, you're going to double or triple the time it takes to implement the ERP. It increases costs a lot. And I would say one of the main cost increases in ERP projects is duration. So when you can get something done quickly and implemented, you're going to end up having lower costs than if it takes longer and stretches out. Even if you continue phase 2 activities after that quick launch, you keep working on things, it will become easier and easier to work on them in an operating system because people are getting familiar with it. And so every change is less dramatic. Whereas if you're doing it in the big project up front, your changes are more dramatic. They're always dramatic until users are comfortable with it and use it. It makes it hard to train because your customized system doesn't match any manuals, any YouTube videos, anything out in the market that users go and try to figure out how to do something on their own. So if if you hire a new controller and the controller has gone out to the job costing module descriptions on YouTube, then they go into your system, but you customize the job costing so it's completely different. They're actually frustrated and they're upset because they can't use what they see on the internet. So the more modern approach, which is used traditionally today, and I mentioned that this old approach was popular in the 90s and the aughts, the 2000s, but it led to this much, much higher failure rate, and led to cost overruns. So in the 10s and the 20s, it was essentially abandoned, and we went with something that is called a minimum viable go live. That is kind of the new approach. And a minimum viable go live is we take the out-of-the-box ERP system, we figure out what are the minimum things we need to match what we have today without trying to add every feature and every bell and whistle that could be added, and what are added features or needs that are needed today because we are being driven to it by a customer or by a process. So needs, it's only what's needed, not what's wanted. And once we do that and we go live with it, it tends to be much easier because we can focus on best practices. Now, a lot of ERP consultants will talk about we're going to bring best practices. What that means is we're going to modify your business processes that are done in your old ERP one way to match the equivalent functionality that works in a slightly different way in the new ERP. So if your purchasing process in your older ERP is following method A and the new ERP has method B, but they're compatible, like they basically achieve the same result. And if you watch the previous video, it's about achieving results as opposed to how you achieve those results. Then that focus on best practices makes a lot of sense. It's easier to change, and this is counterintuitive, but it's easier to change the way your team is conducting business processes than to change the ERP, because the new ERP is coming with a well-designed and easy-to-use path to execute those business processes in, and showing people how that is done and training them to do that is easier than having them try and change it to something they think matches their existing processes. Because if your existing processes were great, you just keep your old ERP. And so how do you avoid this happening? First of all, my recommendation is limit the staff that are going to work in your project in the first half. You don't want to have everybody in it, because the more people are in it, the more ideas and the more likely that this is going to happen. So you want to pick the critical thinkers from your team. You want to make sure they're open to change. So critical thinking is great, but having them also open to change. And you want to set them up with people within that team. And it's going to be a small team because there's not a lot of people in your organization who fit the bill for all of this. They're good with software and they know the business processes that might end up being replaced. They're trusted by other people in the organization. Like, other people know that they know what they're talking about. And you, as an ownership level or senior executive, assuming you are the senior executive watching this video, you set the mandate that the change of process to fit the ERP is okay. Like, it's okay that we're not going to do things the way we were doing them. If the ERP has a good way of doing it, use that. Don't try and change it. Don't say we must fit the process to the current ERP, because even as consultants will tell you, occasionally changing the ERP to fit your process is okay. You just don't want to do it for everything. You want to do it for the things you absolutely have to. So the general outcome of doing it this way is you're going to have a lower percentage rate of failure within the organization. You're going to have a more successful ERP, a very much more likely to have a successful ERP. You're going to have a higher adoption by the team, because the team are going to feel like they can use the new features of the ERP, and they can watch the videos on YouTube, and they can follow along, and they can do those things. You're going to have less friction between you and the ERP consulting firm, because the ERP consulting firm, we know what we're doing. We do a lot of these, and we're going to bring forward what we know works at other clients. And if you trust that, you're going to have less trouble, and you're going to get the project finished more quickly because you're doing less customization. As soon as you start customizing, you're going to dramatically increase the duration of the project. So looking at the new ERP as a continuous process improvement, as opposed to a one and done, install it and forget it, is part of this, because you're doing a minimum viable go live, and you're delaying the nice to have, wants, and even very important but not absolutely needed requirements. You're delaying them to later. You're setting a tone of the ERP is a continuous process improvement. We're going to keep working on adding value through changes to the ERP. And as we do that, the business benefits more and more and more over time. And I think that is a much better approach than the more, I'll call it the 90s and 2000s approach, which was, we're going to put the ERP system in and it's going to work perfectly, and then we can ignore it for the next 10 years because it's all set up perfectly. It's never going to be perfect. Perfection is really a goal, not a destination. And so looking at it as continuous process improvement is a much better way of doing it. I hope this was helpful. Please subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon if you want to be informed of new videos. We release videos all the time. I try and do one of these videos every couple weeks if I can. Sometimes I'll go periods of time where I don't, but there's always other really great quality videos on our site that you can subscribe to. And if you want to get in touch with us, here's our contact information. As I mentioned, I have a book a meeting link below in the description. And otherwise, thanks for watching the video, and have a great day.